Um, Good morning once again. We are here with the series of lectures on principles of economics. I'm Gamal Abdul Nasser of the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, lecturer in economics. Today we are going to look at the principle of demand and supply. We're looking at the theory of demand and supply in macroeconomic theory. And this topic is important because it basically looks at the interaction of opposites in life. There are opposites in life, life and death, heaven and hell, angels and demons, all in the same place, and also men and women. We're just looking at how these different entities act together or coexist to be able to create a harmonious society. When we look at our society today, it's always a struggle between men and women. In marriages, men try to have their way and women try to have their way. If you watch what is going on social media, there's always inner harmony between men and women, and how relationships become bad after a period of time, all because they do not understand the market principle or the principle of demand and supply in the marketplace. So in this video, we're looking at how the two opposites of life, the opposites of life interact, or we need to learn how to balance all these forces to coexist to be able to create value in society. So that is basically what the principle of demand and supply looks at. Just that with the principle of demand and supply, we're going to focus on the market and not in society or family. According to the secular flow of income theory, there are always two markets in the economy, the product market and the resource market. So every time there exists a market, there are buyers and sellers. And the buyers of the goods and services are called demanders, and the sellers of goods and services are called sellers or suppliers or producers. So in this first instance, we are going to look at the concept of demand. The concept of demand. Now, demand has a specific meaning in economics. Demand is the willingness and ability of consumers to buy goods at a range of prices. The willingness and ability of consumers to buy goods at a range of prices. Unless the two conditions of willingness and ability prevail, there is no demand. There is no demand. So economists know that the ability to buy something does not always imply the willingness to do that. After all, Bill Gates, who is the richest man in Ghana, co-founder of Microsoft, is a billionaire, has the ability to buy many things that he chooses not to buy. So basically, we're saying that for demand to occur, the two principles of willingness and ability must interact to create demand in society. Now, demand is underpinned by the law of demand, and the law of demand basically is a basic economic principle that says that there's an inverse relationship between price of a product and the quantity of it that is demanded. There's an inverse relationship between price of a product and the quantity of the product that is demanded. So what that means is that when the price of the product is very high, lower quantity of the product will be demanded, and when the price is very low, higher quantity of the product will be demanded. Ceteris paribus, given that all things are the same. So that basically is the principle of demand, and the principle of demand helps us to be able to draw the demand curve. And the demand curve basically illustrates the relationship between price of a product and the quantity that is the quantity of the product that is demanded. Okay, and so if we graph it out, you'll find that we put price on the y-axis and then we put quantity demanded on the x-axis. And if you draw that, you're going to find that there's an inverse relationship. So you see that the demand curve is downward sloping. The downward sloping illustrates the inverse relationship between price and quantity demanded, and that is what the law of demand says. So it illustrates the principle of law of demand. So the demand curve, like all other curves in economics, can shift. They are dynamic curves. They can shift to the right, that is increase. They can shift to the left. So a rightward shift of the demand curve denotes an increase, and a leftward shift of the demand curve also denotes a decrease in demand. Now, there are three basic principles explain why the demand curve is downward sloping. The first one is the principle of substitution effect. The second one is income effect, and the third one is the law of diminishing marginal productivity and utility, law of diminishing marginal utility. These are the three reasons why the demand curve is downward sloping. So the first one, substitution effect. Substitution effect has to deal with the fact that different products in the different products in the marketplace have different relationships. Okay, and most goods serve the same purpose. Okay, so for example, most drinks serve the same purpose, that is the quench taste. So for example, if the price of milk, if the price of Pepsi is price of Pepsi and Coca-Cola are the same price today, okay, maybe 2 Ghana cedi each, and tomorrow you find that the price of Pepsi has gone up, you'll find that more people will move away from Pepsi, which is more expensive, to the product that is less expensive. So because of this substitution effect, people will tend to prefer products that are less expensive to products that are more expensive, ceteris paribus. So that's the idea of substitution effect. So the product that has more, the product that is less expensive is a product that many people would tend to prefer, ceteris paribus, because human beings are rational beings and they will prefer those products that are cheaper. So that's the substitution effect. Now the second effect is the income effect. The income effect speaks to the nature of the purchasing power of money. So, for example, if the price of the item is very low, the purchasing power has increased, and so the consumer will be able to buy more. And if the price of the product is very high, purchasing power has indeed decreased. Purchasing power has decreased, and so the consumer will not be able to procure more goods and services. So this is the nature of the effects of income. Now the third one is law of diminishing marginal utility. Marginal means additional, diminishing means decreasing, and then satisfaction means satisfaction, decreasing marginal satisfaction. So law of decreasing additional benefits. So as you tend to consume more of a product, utility tends to decrease. As you tend to consume more of a product, the satisfaction that you gain from the product will tend to decrease. So these are the three basic factors. These are the three basic reasons why the demand curve is downward sloping. Having talked about the principle of demand, the law of demand, and then the reason why the demand curve is downward sloping, we're going to look at the shifters of demand, or the determinants of demand. So consumers or business owners are interested in understanding the principles of demand. What are the shifters of demand? What will cause demand to increase, and what will cause demand to decrease? And five major principles explain why the demand curve shifts, why the demand curve shifts either to the right or to the left, and these are called the shifters or the determinants of demand. Now the first one is taste or preference. The second one is income effect, that is the income of the consumer. The third one is the price of related goods. Okay, the fourth is expectations. And the fifth is number of consumers. So these are the five principles that drive demand, that influence demand. So for taste and preferences, when the taste for a product goes up, people tend to buy more of the product. So if the taste and preference goes up, demand would increase. So for example, if a new research comes out to say that a product, to support the consumption of a certain product, you'll find that taste and preference would go up, and so the product will become more trendy, and because of that it would increase demand. So that is how taste would go. On the other hand, if there's a negative report that the product leads to something very bad or leads to very poor welfare outcomes, it is going to decrease demand, and taste is going to fall, and that is going to decrease demand for the product. So that is about taste and preference. Now the second principle is consumers, number of consumers. All of a sudden, if there are more people in town, or if there are more buyers, it is going to increase demand for certain products. That is how consumers would influence that. Now the third has to do with the price of related goods. That is, it has to do with substitutes and complements, has to do with complements and substitutes, and that also influence the nature of the demand. And the fourth is income. Income, we are interested in knowing whether the product is an inferior good or the product is a normal good. Okay, so as the consumer's income tend to increase, they tend to move away from things that are inferior to consume things that are better, and those products are normal goods. And the fifth principle, which is expectations. Expectations influence demand in the sense that if consumers perceive that demand is going, if consumers perceive that prices are going to go up, in the next few months, they are going to hold back demand. If prices, if they perceive that prices of things are going to go up in the next few months, they are going to demand more now and buy more and then hold back demand in future and so on. So expectations also influence consumer willingness and ability to buy goods and services. Also, that is the principle of demand. So basically, this is what demand looks at, and then we are going to look at the concept of supply. So just as there's a specific meaning for demand, there's also a specific meaning for supply in economics. Supply is the willingness and ability of sellers to offer a range of goods at different prices. So it's their willingness to offer the product for sale at different range of prices. Okay. So the basic law of supply says that there's a direct relationship between price of a product and the quantity of it that is supplied. Why? So when the price of the item is very high, more suppliers will supply, and if the price falls, less people will supply. Why? Because people supply when prices are high because of the incentive of profit making. So when the prices are very high, there's the incentive. They tend to supply more. Suppliers tend to supply more because it incentivizes them to supply more because of the profit that they will make. And people are human beings, they are rational beings, and so when the prices are high, they are tended to also supply in order to make profit. So this is the nature of them. So when we graph it out, we're going to find that the supply curve is upward sloping, denoting the direct relationship between price and quantity supplied, denoting the direct relationship between quantity supplied and quantity demanded. I will not give you the reasons why the supply curve is upward sloping because we'll look at it in our next video when we look at some aspects of supply. We'll look at the sticky wage theory and all that. So we'll not look at that in this case. So we'll look at the shifters of supply. We'll look at the shifters of supply. Just as there are shifters of demand, there are shifters of supply. There are 5 basic shifters of supply. The first is price of inputs or resource. The second is technology. Technology is a shifter of supply. Technology is a shifter of supply. The third is taxes and subsidies. Taxes and subsidies are shifters of supply. The fourth is expectations, and also the fifth is number of suppliers. Okay, so the first principle, which is the price of resources, when the price of input is very high, few suppliers will tend to supply because it squeezes profits. So when the price of the resource is very high, when the price of raw materials go up, when the price of inputs or the resources go up, few people are willing and able to supply. The ability to supply will decrease. But when the price of the resources, that is the price of inputs, fall, suppliers' willingness and ability to supply would go up. And so that is what the first principle says. Now the second principle is technology. Supply is related to technology. So depending on the nature of technology, supply can go up. So technology is just the body of knowledge and skills that producers need to have to be able to increase supply. Okay, producers. So depending on the nature of technology can shift the supply curve to the right or supply curve to the left. So whether the technology is indigenous technology, analog technology, digital technology, or computerized technology, we'll be able to determine whether supply would go up or not. So the higher or the more advanced the technology, the higher the supply curve will shift certain risk variables, and the lower the supply curve, and the poorer the technology, the lower the supply, and so on and so forth. So this is basically how supply is influenced by technology. So if the technology is advanced, supply would increase. Now, we look at number of suppliers. So if there are more people supplying a certain product, of course, supply would go up, and if there are few suppliers, supply would fall. And also the concept of expectations. If suppliers expect prices to go up in future, they will supply less now, and that will decrease supply and supply more in future because they want to make more profit. So these are basically some of the shifters of supply. So having looked at the two major concepts, that is the concept of demand and the concept of supply and the shifters of supply, we are going to a real marketplace where these two concepts of demand and supply interact. Okay, so market is an institution that allows demanders and suppliers to interact, and that creates the equilibrium. Okay, that creates the equilibrium. So when we put the demand curve and the supply curve together, it creates the equilibrium price and the equilibrium quantity, and that is what the market clearing price is. Okay, that is what the market clearing price is. And equilibrium is the point where quantity demanded is equal to the quantity supplied. There could also be disequilibrium where quantity demanded is greater than quantity supplied. Okay, in that case, that is shortage. And where there could also be another form of disequilibrium where quantity supplied is greater than quantity demanded. In that case, there's surplus. Okay, so the market, when we put these two curves, it looks at all these interactions. Okay, it looks at all these basic kinds of interactions. So the essence of learning the concept of demand and supply is to be able to help us analyze the effect of uh, the effect of events on price and quantity demanded. So another thing you have to look at is to be able to analyze what's it called, to be able to predict and forecast the behavior of demand and supply or price and quantity demanded depending on the shifters of supply. So we can learn in our next video, we'll learn how to analyze markets for different products depending on various events or scenarios. Okay, so thank you very much for joining us in this demand and supply lecture. Again, this is Gamal Abdel Nasser, lecturer consultant, Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration, World Bank consultant, and it's my privilege to give you this second series of lectures. Until we meet again, have a nice time. Bye.